I never thought I'd see the day Sango wore the crown. But there he was, standing tall in the grand hall, the new Alefin of Oyo. The crown rested on his head, a symbol of his newfound power. Yet, in his eyes, I saw not just pride, but something else, something heavy. It was as if the crown weighed more than it looked. It wasn't long before we began to feel the changes. Sango was a just ruler, but his decisions were firm and sometimes difficult for the people to understand. The peace we longed for was not as simple as we hoped. The first challenge came sooner than anyone expected. A neighboring kingdom, once held at bay by the strength of Oyo, decided to test our new king. They sent envoys, their words veiled with threats and their demands steep. They thought that with the old king gone and the young Sango on the throne, Oyo would be weak. I remember the day the envoys arrived. The air was thick with tension as they entered the palace, their arrogance clear in the way they walked. Sango sat on his throne, calm and composed, but I could see the fire in his eyes. One of the envoys, a tall man with a sneer that made my skin crawl, stepped forward. Oyo has changed, he said, his voice dripping with false concern. Perhaps it is time for new alliances, ones that reflect your kingdom's diminished status. The room went silent. Everyone waited for Sango's response. He stood slowly, his presence commanding, and walked towards the envoys. When he spoke, his voice was steady but filled with an underlying power. Oyo has not diminished, he said. It has only grown stronger. If you think otherwise, you are welcome to test that strength. The envoys exchanged nervous glances. They hadn't expected such a bold response. The sneering man tried to maintain his composure. We will take your words back to our king, he said, but his confidence had clearly been shaken. As they left, I felt a surge of pride in Sango. He had stood his ground, proving that Oyo would not be intimidated. But I also knew that this was just the beginning. The threat of war loomed on the horizon. The days that followed were filled with preparations. Sango called on the warriors of Oyo, rallying them for the defense of the kingdom. The city buzzed with activity, the people readying themselves for what might come. I watched as Sango trained with his men, his movements sharp and precise. He wasn't just a king who sat on a throne, he was a warrior who led by example. But even as he trained, I saw the weight of his new role pressing down on him. Leading a kingdom was more than just strength, it required wisdom, strategy, and sometimes, sacrifices. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I found Sango standing alone on the palace balcony, looking out over the city. His shoulders were tense, and his usually bright eyes were shadowed with worry. I approached quietly, not wanting to disturb him, but he noticed me and beckoned me closer. "What troubles you, my king?" I asked, though I could already guess. He sighed, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. "It's not just the enemy outside our walls," he said softly. "It's the fear within. The people look to me for strength, but sometimes I wonder if I can give them enough." I had never seen Sango like this, vulnerable, unsure. He was always so strong, so certain. It was a side of him that few ever saw. "You've already given them more than they could ask for," I said. "They trust you." "We trust you." He nodded slowly, but the worry didn't leave his eyes. "Trust is a heavy thing," he murmured. "It's a burden I carry gladly, but it doesn't make it any lighter." The next day, the news we had been dreading arrived. The neighboring kingdom was preparing for war. They saw Sango's refusal to bow as a challenge, one they intended to meet with force. Sango gathered his council, and I was there, listening from the shadows as they discussed their options. Some argued for negotiation, hoping to avoid bloodshed. Others, including Sango, believed that Oyo must stand firm and show strength. In the end, it was decided. Oyo would not back down. Sango would lead the warriors into battle, just as he had before. But this time, it wasn't just about protecting a border, it was about defending the very heart of the kingdom. The morning of the battle, the city was quiet. The usual sounds of the market were replaced by the clanging of weapons and the whispers of worried families. Sango, clad in his armor, stood before his warriors, his presence a beacon of strength. I watched as he addressed them, his voice carrying across the courtyard. Today, we fight not just for ourselves, but for Oyo, for our families, our future. We stand together, and together, we will prevail. The warriors cheered, their spirits lifted by his words. I felt the weight of the moment, the gravity of what lay ahead. As Sango mounted his horse, ready to lead the charge, he caught my eye. There was a brief moment of understanding between us, a silent acknowledgement of what was to come. Keep the people safe, he said, and with that, he rode off, his warriors following close behind. The battle was fierce. We could hear the distant clash of swords, the shouts of warriors. The tension in the city was palpable, every moment stretching into eternity as we waited for news. Finally, as the sun began to set, the sound of hoofs echoed through the streets. The gates opened, and Sango rode in, victorious but weary. The people cheered, rushing to greet him, their fears melting away at the sight of their king. But I saw the toll it had taken on him. The battles he fought were not just with swords, they were battles of the heart, the mind, the soul. Sango had won the day, but the war within him was far from over. That night, as the city celebrated, Sango stood alone once more, the burden of power heavy on his shoulders. And in that quiet moment, I realized that being a king was not about wearing a crown or leading armies. It was about carrying the weight of a kingdom and doing so with the strength to never falter. And Sango, for all his doubts, was that king.